Welcome to DXgov governance discussion for Wednesday, March 8th, 1600 UTC. We will share the agenda first to go over what we will talk about on today's call. So we have the proposal roundup, as always, to go over a bunch of proposals on mainnet. Discussion items, we have 3 discussion items. One, hopefully won't be much of a discussion. Daylight savings time is coming up, at least in the US. So I just wanted to make sure touch base on that. Always a fun DAO conversation. 2, the Operations Guild has prepared a recommendation proposal that is now live for the Treasury manager position that it was looking to fill. And then 3rd, we had the post from Ross about an mStable acquisition proposal. So just wanted to walk through that, see if there's any interest from DXDAO and maybe like putting together something more specific there. But we will dive first into the mainnet rep syncs, or sorry, the proposals here. So starting with the new funding and voting power, we had a rep sync for Melanie, which I feel like I meant to vote on because it's a good rep sync proposal because it has links, but I have not. Gas is there, but you can see this is going to pass in 8 hours. And yes, she had labeled each of the proposals that she had earned for this over this time period. It's a 0.88%, 20,000 there. And then we have DLab's vesting contract for January, February. I believe I actually did not vote on this one, but I will kind of maybe show people how to check this real quick. So basically we want to see, does this vesting contract have 1-year cliff and 3 years? So we just go to the contract he created. You can see DLab's right there, contract, and you just want to do read. And then the cliff thing we want to look at, this is a Unix time number. So we would just take this. So this would be basically when the vesting can start. So we'll just do this and January 1st, 2024. Right. So it starts in 1 year. I feel like probably should have been January 31st, but yeah, so you can see that there. That's the first one. And then the second one is the duration. So you want to make sure that this is 3 years. I think maybe some people might know how many seconds are in a year. Isn't that a Rent song? Or minutes, sorry. So we're just going to put this in here. And we see, yeah, 3 years here for that. So yeah, that's how you check those for vesting contracts there. There were a couple. Violet had a couple there. Actually voted for this one here that I checked this morning doing the same way. This one is actually using a February 1st cliff date instead of January 1st. And yeah, so those are the 2 vesting contracts there. We also have another mainnet sync here from Medusa here. And so this is syncing from Gnosis Chain to mainnet rep. And as always, it's always good to have links to other proposals when you are doing these. But I think that's his second. You can see the second mainnet sync there, and you can see how, I think it's very cool how much, reputation continues to get distributed. I think we kind of lose sight of this, but here we got like 2.4 million rep. And so that means 1.4 million rep that is inflated and been issued since DXDAO's inception, like 3.5 years ago. And so there will be a bunch more kind of in here. I think there's, about 50,000 rep that is in the queue currently there. So we have Medusa's here. We also have another March 2023 tokens claim from Nathan here. So he's been doing this every month to claim this. He could probably do this on Gnosis Chain if he was interested in, but maybe either one will work. I think he probably voted for this himself there. But you can see here on his reference spreadsheet, which has lots of colors actually. You can see here how he's calculating each of these. So yeah, proposal here, and then this is the one he's doing right here. A little pretty. It is not Comic Sans, even though I thought it was. It says LexEnd thing. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, you can see here this 6.48 is the one from this, and you can see how the 6.48 is calculated by adding up these different parts here. Okay, and actually I'll need to update his spreadsheet because he's not calculating the February vest. Maybe he has it off by just a little bit. This is why it says claim month over here, 1/1/2023. Okay, so those are vested DXD proposals. We have those. We have the mainnet. We have the 2 mainnet syncs, and then we have a big ZET Q4 2022 payout. This was posted in the forum a couple days ago here, and this is a payment for, as I said, 3 months of work. So this is in last year, so several months ago. So for October, November, and December for swapper stuff there. So you can have a look on the previous proposals that he had there, and then I think also the goals and things that were accomplished in Q4. And I think the one benefit of doing these retroactive ones is that you can very much see the actual proof of work for those payments there. And so you can check out this proposal here. And then I believe that is it for the funding and voting power proposals. Elsewhere, we've been doing the buyback proposals through CowSwap, and so those have gone through. I had the first successful one over the weekend where I actually, instead of Dave, submitted the buyback proposal. So I'm feeling confident that I had done that, and so you can see the other ones that are coming up over the next 2 weeks. So the goal here is basically to do it every 5 days, and then to also split between WETH and USD orders. So the Treasury does not get too imbalanced, trying to keep it close to that 2/3 ETH level here. So you can see here we have a 200 WETH order that is set to pass in 2 days and 1 hour here. And as always, you can check the actual order, how it's signed from DXgov here. You can see the actual price here for that 0.457 WETH. So that won't be 2 days for WETH. And then there's also another one that is 7 days after that for WETH, and then another one that is 11 days after that for WETH. And then we just boosted one today that is here. That is another one. This is 0.4685. You can see how the price has actually gone up a little bit, and that's because of the buybacks, and the contraction actually increases the DXD price. And so this one is submitted today. And so after we'll have 2 days of boot, then it will have 14 days there. So yeah, as I said, we're kind of trying to spread them out every 5 days. And then the other thing is trying to introduce more stablecoin orders so that things are a little bit less imbalanced. This is the good thing about using the member balance or redemptions, is that those can come back in stablecoins as well. And so that's one thing that keeps it balanced. So for this is, I think this would be the largest order for stablecoins that we've done for DXD. And this would be 100,000 LUSD, just because we have a lot of LUSD, and as opposed to some of the other ones. And the big thing is USDC has 8 decimals, so that ends up causing a lot of problems. That's annoying to use, whereas the LUSD is a nice 18 decimal one there. So this one, is submitted at 731. I think this was when ETH was at like 1560. So you can imagine that the dollar amount here fluctuates more than the ETH price for the WETH DXD orders there. So there is some concern that this price will either be too high or too low. And so right now, actually, you'll notice there was another proposal submitted almost 2 weeks ago. I think ETH was at like 1650, 1660, and this submitted it's just 15,000, but it's submitted at 752 DXD per LUSD. And so I have not voted, no one has voted on this, but I am not planning to vote on it right now, just because the current redemption price for DXD, and why don't we just put that up real quick, is I think 730. Yeah, 737. Right. And so this one, I don't think necessarily falls into that. If ETH goes up, or if the price changes a little bit, I think we'd be willing to do that. And maybe if it was 740, it would be also possible. So that's another tool we have for that. But I think in general, it's good to have these stablecoin orders so that they rebalance them. And just as the other ones, this 100,000 LUSD is not a fill or kill, it's a liquidity order. So that means you can access it. Many different traders can access it. And you can do this not through the CowSwap UI directly. And maybe I should just show people this. But you basically have to go to this limit here to unlock. And you just have to actually place the DXD order for whatever you want there. And then you do it whatever price is in the This is the WETH one, but whatever price is in there. I actually don't know how it would affect if you're doing stable coins, if you were able to go and do like a WETH order for limit and does Cal automatically settle that. I would think or hope that it would, because presumably there's some WETH to DAI trades or WETH to USD, LUSD trades that it can access as well, but it definitely needs to come through the limit order page. Cool. Any questions, thoughts on, show them how it's done. So you can do these limit orders, Vinky, in Swapper. I didn't know that. You can do limit orders, but you can do the same limit orders that will access the liquidity, I guess. I guess it's the same thing. Yeah. Okay. So it's right here. Okay, that's good. So yeah, that's a better one. Maybe we should make a little.
Want a how-to, and I think we should be able to do that. Create a how-to for how to get this.
Yeah, and the fact that it's through Swapper, I knew we had CalSwap, but forgot we could do the limit orders through those. I know that's what I'm not going to do one now, but yeah, that's maybe something we should think about doing, because it would be pretty simple. Just, I guess, do we have like a how to place a limit order guide?
Yeah.
It basically is that, so we could kind of maybe put that in. Yeah, another reason to use Swapper. It's actually much easier to do this than like CalSwap. It's, I actually don't like that they have this kind of separate interface here, right? So when you do limit here, kind of opens up to this, almost like pro trading, whereas like here it is just the same thing. And I know you can do this if you want to go that route as well. Yeah, so definitely use Swapper. Yeah. Oh, this is perfect. So when anyone asks about DXD, like buying the DXD through the buybacks, like we should just send them this article from Swapper and just like, you have to put a limit order on Swapper. Okay, anyway. That is it for the proposal, the mainnet proposals. Were there any outstanding thoughts or comments on those? And in a interesting turn of events, there are no proposals on Gnosis Chain. So just to confirm here, I think this is probably the first time in a governance call in a long time where we haven't, oh, that's not the wrong, that's the actual, where we have not had a Gnosis Chain proposal. I think partially because we've, obviously the guilds have taken out a lot of the individual contributor proposals is the big thing that was going through Gnosis there. And yeah, so we'll continue to monitor it, and it's definitely the place to go when you want different smaller payments in terms of the like less than 5,000 for DXDAO. There's been some things there that have been very helpful for that. But yeah, and I think we'll have to figure out, we'll use it for signaling, because that was like kind of a way to use that there. But yeah, I think as Keenan says, to be fair, micropayments are mostly abstracted to guilds, which is, yeah, that's kind of true. That's kind of the point, is that we don't necessarily need to see all of the individual worker proposals and go over them on this call as much as we need to like have a higher level view of what's going on in the guilds and how they're operating. But xStable will still be there. There's still, right, $80,000-$90,000 in there. 51, yeah, about 60, 70 for that. Cool. Keenan says, are we doing mid-period check-ins for the guilds? Yes, I'm hoping we can do quarterly. So the end of March will be the halfway point. So that'll be like 3 or 4 weeks from now. So I'm hoping the beginning of April, or maybe start the end of March, we just do like a quarterly update from each of the guilds there. Something I'm going to talk about on tomorrow's Operations Guild monthly meeting is what to prepare for that. But it would be great, over maybe, yes, I said starting in the end of March, beginning of April, if we could just have either there's a separate call or it's part of the weekly call that this guild already runs, but just maybe like an update to DXgov governance. Forum posts would be also great, or something that could be shared about some of the progress so far. This also comes in conjunction. We have to think the other thing going on at this time is we will need to do another funding proposal for Q2. So remember the way that we did the budgetary process, we approved 1H 2023 budgets, but we only sent the first quarter of that budgets to the guilds themselves, or to the multi-sigs too, and then to the guilds. And so we need to do a re-up of that over the next month here. So probably won't start that process. I'll put a form and post in the forum. I'm thinking probably not this week, but maybe early next week there. And we will, start that process there. I'm not sure there's anything different we'll do than last time. I think last time we did send things to the multi-sigs because this is right when guilds were kind of being set up. But now that some of the guilds are running money and doing proposals from them, we may go directly through the guilds themselves. But we'll discuss how those logistics happen in the next, say maybe 2 weeks from today. We'll have a plan for that. And so in conjunction with that, again, it would be good to have the guilds do midway check-in points or quarterly updates. And I think that's kind of the cadence we can see long-term, right? That you have twice a year, December, June, or you have the half-year budget. So you're kind of looking at the analysis like that. And then twice a year, April, October, you have like the midway check-in points for those that are providing some of that check-in to the community there. And I think those are good. It's a good cadence to have. Anyway, I'm talking a lot. Okay, moving on to discussion items. So the first discussion item, I guess, is daylight savings time. What I like to say is you're not a real DAO unless you have daylight savings time problems, or you're not a real DAO unless you have a daylight savings time policy. So you have to go through that. So all I know is this week in the US is the end of daylight savings time. So that means we will spring forward, and that means it will be like an hour ahead than we are now. And I believe Sky is our resident daylight savings time expert. I believe we are not going to change. The only people that are changing are the Americans, who will go forward for 2 weeks. And then when the Europeans catch up, then they will go back. Oh no. This is the good one. We don't have to do anything.
Well, you said Americans and Keenan's Canadian, so maybe North Americans, or Northern American people. But yeah, so we won't change the UTC time of the calls. We won't shift that until Europe changes their time.
And then we actually shift the UTC time to 1500, even though most of the world doesn't actually switch because everyone does the daylight savings time, but UTC does not. Right? So basically all of the calls should be at the same time for everyone in a month, unless you don't celebrate or practice daylight savings time.
Correct.
All right. So just to...
And the only reason we have to do this is because the people on the edges of a working day, which is for DXgov currently is West Coast of US and Canada, and then Israel, like Tel Aviv and Bulgaria. Those are the edges. And if you were in the middle, like 1 hour here and there doesn't matter. But if you're on one of those edges, it's pretty sensitive how early that call is and how late that call could be for those people. So we're trying to keep it the same local time for everyone generally throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think the key one, so there's that end, but then you think on the West Coast of the US, it's basically like, I don't know, Sky's, I don't know if it's there now, but oftentimes is there that, and Keenan, of course, that 8 a.m. is when this call is there now. And I just think 8 a.m. is like a mountain or a very big difference between 7 a.m. And so I think making sure that, and the West Coast is where LA, San Francisco, some bunch of this country up north, they have some city and some provinces over there, but there's a lot of people in that time zone that I think are important. So I think having that at 8 a.m. when people come on is very important. And that's why we adjust it this way. And
also other communities or orgs that have like a European time for like maybe another call set or people upskilled or whatever it is, or US community could have a time set. They don't change it, right? Because those are local times. And so then if your schedule's like, set up for local times, you don't really want to change it at half the year to a different time. So keeping local times seems to be easiest for everyone.
cool. So thank you for the daylight savings interludes.
We also now, we have a couple contributors in the Eastern or Asian region and potentially more. Like we have some events happening in Asia in the next couple months. A DAO focused event, ETH Tokyo. There's an event in Seoul, really focused on DAO's stuff. And actually, interestingly, like in Denver, there are about 30 hackers actually came from Korea to attend ETH Denver. And they actually did really, really well. And so in the last 6 months, there's been a big push to bring DAO ideas and hacking ideas and things closer together between people that are in the Western region and Eastern region. And I think DAO Tokyo and the event in Seoul and ETH Tokyo are part of that. I only know a few DAO things happening in Asia, like historically, but there's interest. And so potentially we can try to capture more of that audience into the ecosystem and the tools that DXDAO is building, whether that's Swapper or Davi and governance products, and then hopefully soon Carrot products as well. So
yeah, I would be very interested in that, and I think Ross from DXgov is there now, and I think some people are going to be going to DAO Tokyo. There's an opportunity there. So yeah, I'd be interested if we wanted to set up another, like maybe a monthly call that is at a time that is more conducive to the West Coast. I mean, sorry, to Asia. And so that would be maybe something that's like 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. New York time, right? Because then that would be in the morning in Asia there, and then you'd get all of the US there. Or alternatively, it can be like Europe and Asia. But as you realize very quickly, like the world is round, so you can't get all of them on the same time zone, but basically having 2 of 3 and figuring out how to include the Asian group. And this is something we've been talking about for years, but still an opportunity. Okay. Any other daylight savings time? So just to wrap up, for the next 2 weeks, or starting this Saturday, for the next 2 weeks, all Americans will have these North Americans, probably, and I don't think South Americans go through at this time. They will have the normal meeting times will be an hour later. And then until European contributors go through daylight savings time, and then it'll be back to the normal time. And then the other change is that going forward, it will be at 1500 UTC rather than 1600 UTC, even though there should be no difference to your actual perception of time. Well, time is a social construct, of course. Yeah, good luck with your 2 a.m. call. Okay, so we kind of move along here. We did spend a lot of time on that, but some fun things there. So next up is the Operations Guild Treasury recommendation. And so this is a proposal is up in the Operations Guild in Davi. So you can see here, it looks nice and pretty. So this was submitted by Melanie after some discussion, and this has been a lot of different things. So Melanie, maybe you can walk us through what this proposal is specifically saying.
Yeah, definitely. And apologies in advance if I have any connection issues. My service is not great. I actually also am in Asia, so it is now 12:30 a.m. for me taking this call, but it's fine for me for now.
It was like on cue when I think she cut off. It says green here. So maybe we give another.
But the discussion and live proposal can be.
Hey, Melanie, we lost you for a minute. Could you just kind of go from the top here and say what this is? We lost you for about 20 seconds there.
Oh, darn. Okay. Well, basically, it specifically just outlines the due diligence done by the Contributor X and Operations Guild over the past few months to just help determine what next steps are best to pursue for DXgv's treasury management. Potential routes include exploration of like the utilization of investment managers like Kapartki and Avant-Garde. If you've been following governance and in the forums, you will have seen both groups give presentations and their posted proposals. And also, additionally, an avenue we've been exploring is recruiting an individual contributor to fill this role. And this recommendation proposal just dives deeper into the processes around all the potential options we explored. But ultimately, after analyzing all of those specific options, the proposal recommends onboarding an individual contributor, Maddie G, to support with DXgv's treasury functions. We recruited multiple candidates, and we really felt that Maddie G is definitely a great fit for this role. He has past experience as a CPA. He was a treasury steward at Rookdow, and he's actually joined quite a few of our governance and monetary policy calls, and I think more than a handful of DXgv contributors have had a chance to meet with him and speak with him, and he's answered lots of questions. And we all definitely feel that he is a great fit for this role. Additionally, some costs came into consideration when we decided to make this recommendation. In our H1 Operations Guild budget, we allocated around like $140,000 for a new treasury manager, and the cost for Maddie G to onboard would come in quite under that budget, whereas like utilizing an investment management group like Kapartki or Avant-Garde, their annual costs are quite higher. But I also think that it's important to note that this recommendation also suggests that Maddie G still collaborate with like the Operations Guild in the future to explore like long-term treasury management solutions, such as utilizing Kapartki or Avant-Garde in the future. But with that being said, it does currently look like this proposal will pass in the Operations Guild. I know I've had a few people ask, are we going to bring this to a DAO-wide discussion? Of course we are. But we just wanted to come to a consensus in the Operations Guild and have a discussion there before we discuss it further with the DXgv community. I'm not sure if Chris or anybody else in the Ops Guild had anything else to add around that.
Yeah, I'd be curious for questions and comments. And I just think this is like a recommendation that has a lot of maybe specifics in it, or is trying to, say, yes, this is something we can have to fill the need now, but also I think it says here, exploring more on the investment management side once we get a foundation on, the accounting there. And then as Daddy Matty is actually in the audience or on the call here, so you can also answer questions for that. But any questions on recommendation or process? participant stats. See how long I've talked. 26 minutes of this 35-minute call. So. Cool. So it's also kind of cool to use guilds for this, right? This was something I think kind of did voting. And so actually we had created a discussion on this in guilds here that you can see there. That's where one of the comments from Vinky was there. So kind of cool how this was there. I actually do think maybe as something going forward, it'd be great if we could have this discussion that was in the discussion part actually also be in the proposal itself, because I think that's like an important context, I guess, for that. And yeah, as I said, it's kind of cool to do that. And so this is 2 days and 2 hours and 21 hours just for 3 days there. And so, yeah, assuming this passes, then next week we would start the DAO-wide discussion there.
Just a question. I mean, can you go in a little bit detail about what sort of comparisons, apart from the cost, that we did in onboarding a contributor towards whatever Avantgarde or Karpaki was doing? Because some of the things that Karpaki mentioned was about this biz dev opportunities that they would bring. And I hope that the returns on that is much more than the 150K cost difference would be. So, I mean, I just wanted to understand how you guys have gotten through this process.
Yeah, I think there are definitely different strengths.
Yeah.
And, go ahead. Yeah, Mel, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's a good question. Kind of coming into filling this role, we identified we had a need with Dave leaving, and there are a lot of daily responsibilities that our treasury that Dave did fulfill on a daily basis. So although, you know, there's biz dev opportunities with Kaparki and Avantgarde, there's still things that we require as a DAO from an individual contributor. But kind of like the recommendation states that, you know, we're not completely, you know, dismissing the idea of exploring utilizing an investment manager. This is just what we currently need at the moment from a treasury, like an accounting operations standpoint.
Would it cost us more than the 390K that Kapaki had mentioned, or would it be like now we would look at 390K plus the contributor payment of Daddy Matty?
So I think the way that Kaparki had their proposals structured, and this is like they're not as finalized in this, but they had these two different options. One was like the 200K and the other was the 390K. I think I said that in there. And so the 390K would actually be the much more operationally intensive one. So that was when we were telling them that, yeah, well, there's actually a lot that we need from an operational standpoint too, and it's not just on the investment side. So that's what the all-inclusive one from Kaparki was the 380K plus a 15% performance fee. And then I think, so I think going forward, the way that I see this, I think it's like more about the order that this is done, that I think it's important to get the foundation in terms of what are the Treasury needs, what are the Treasury's goals, how do we mention like kind of all these bigger ideas, how do we get some consensus on what those are, and then look to implement the like management deployment strategies of those. And I think along with that is other BD opportunities. I completely agree with you on Kaparki's advantage in terms of the BD. I think I put this in the original reply I sent to Kaparki. I think there's a big opportunity to keep building that relationship on Gnosis Chain with Swap. I think Swapper specifically has a lot to potentially gain from that. So I'm very interested in figuring out how to deepen that relationship. I think as the recommendation kind of says, it's basically like starting with the accounting operational side of things before moving to the investment manager biz dev stuff. But exactly how that affects like what the potential proposal through Kaparki would be, I'm not sure. But I know the 380K one did include operational help. So Kaparki 390K if included Maddie Employment and 2 others. So I'm not sure if it does include Maddie Employment because that was actually put in there before Matt had put his proposal up. So yeah, the additional cost would not be 390K. Like, I mean, I can kind of, we can see how this could work and we can piece these things together. But I think it was additional operational help, but I don't know if it's specifically priced with Maddie, I think is the question. Thank you. I don't know if that answers your question. Melanie had kind of maybe the more direct answer to start.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, would be good to know how we would engage with Karpaki or Avantgarde after, if Maddie starts with us, and then what sort of portfolio that they would be holding, and if they would be interested in holding that limited amount of portfolio as well.
Right. I think that,
Yeah, we're also, I mean, talking very closely with those parties, like, for example, Karpaki, but we're actually bringing them new ideas that they weren't even thinking about, that are solutions to things that DAOs like DXDAO and DNS and other DAOs actually need. So far, we're seeing, this very intensive, multiple people hiring people to manage a portfolio for a DAO that's not necessarily a very active management. And like, whether that's your native token or just ETH and staking ETH, which DXDAO already does, right? Is to like pay a lot extra for things that we already and could do is like less interesting on a scalable basis across the entire Web3 and DAO space than actually figuring out the products that a DAO actually needs. So if you like sit down and say, what does DXDAO actually need to do with its treasury? I don't think it's not like, I personally don't think it's a super active management thing. And so paying a lot of money for a handful of people to actively manage the treasury at this point is less interesting than finding a person who actually can do a lot of the stuff that actually on the grounds, like hands on the ground, needs to get done, and improving like accounting and treasury reporting and all that kind of stuff, and working with those teams that want to bring solutions to DAO to actually work with them to develop the products that DAOs, including DXDAO, actually need. And so that's increasing and strengthening a relationship with those parties. It's actually teaching them. It's actually developing solutions that we actually need in the space based on the experience and what we know. And that can also strengthen partnerships and business development opportunities. But right off the bat, it's like that doesn't seem like that, like hiring one of those other ones would accomplish all the things that DXDAO actually needs. And so we'd rather work with them to bring new ideas that DAOs actually need. DXDAO plus other DAOs, and then figure out how you can make it scalable, right? Like if you're doing what those treasury management teams are doing, you can't just hire 3 people every time you bring on some new money from some new community in the Web3 space. Otherwise, then you get 100 people in that organization, which doesn't make any sense, right? So figuring out what actually needs to happen is actually more interesting, in my opinion.
thank you. Are you preparing?
Yeah, no, I'm not preparing. Yeah,
Wait,
I hear you. I hear you, but I just wanted to see how thought process has been. That's all. Yeah, it's fine.
And one more comment on like process or like learning process, I guess I should say. I think it has been so maybe instructive is the right word to talk about this. So I individually met with all three of these groups, individuals in Denver, and kind of had really great conversations, all of which have been follow-up conversations that I've had individually with them, plus presenting to DXDAO and hearing that, plus even some, competition amongst those and talking about different proposals, plus kind of hearing feedback from there. I think it has been a very good process for figuring out what DXDAO needs, and I think has moved us forward to that. I think this, we want to, I guess, see that this is part of the process in terms of like being, communicating and kind of growing things within the DAO and the knowledge there. So, and I think kind of what you're talking about, Venki, is like all these things in terms of offering things there. After this is all important context for how we try to move forward. Is like one of the discussion we had that there. So I guess, yeah. Cool. And I guess just to give some context in the chat that's going on, if people are, so apparently, I guess Kaparki is charging Gnosis 1% in AUM and a 20 yield.
And I mean, we're used to like traditional funds, right? And how funds work. Karpaki, who came out of Gnosis, is a very unique scenario, and 20% of yield obtained I don't know exactly how they're measuring that and what their benchmark is, right? Like there are some funds in the crypto world where the benchmark is Bitcoin, right? And like if you outperform Bitcoin, you get paid. But like if you're getting, and I think Chris wrote this in the proposal, if you're like getting the performance of DXD price going up and ETH price going up, and you're paying based on performance of that, it's like and DXDAO is already doing that actually, right? DXDAO is already staking ETH. You got to get very detailed on exactly how a performance measurement would incentivize a team. And the Gnosis one's even more complicated because at one point they were also in charge of growing the Gnosis Chain ecosystem. I don't know if they're still doing that or if Gnosis Builder is taking that over, but that like makes it a lot more complicated as well. And so they have a big portfolio, but if that was all in ETH probably would have outperformed it potentially, but who knows? So it's a lot of customization basically.
Inno nominates questions. So you didn't ask them how they're measuring, I guess it's like the performance, which they get their management fee in your due diligence process of making the recommendation. So I think this is what Sky was talking about. That is a little, they are kind of, typically when you charge a management fee, your like AUM has a benchmark to dollars or ETH or something like that. So it is a little bit different system from this. And if you go back to the discussion in the ENS DAO around this, actually there was still some discussion around this 2 weeks ago when they were looking to send the funds, how exactly they're calculating that. So I think overall it is an interesting model. I think for this one specifically, the way that they do it is they do calculate it like basically on a weekly basis, right? And so they're like looking at the yield on a weekly basis, and then they're like taking the fees from that. And it appears the fees are also being taken in, I think, dollars or like whatever they're doing on that weekly basis. But that is not necessarily what the yield is always being generated in, because it's kind of being generated those different ways. So I think the weekly harvesting, I guess, is the yield, is how they're actually doing the management fee, as opposed to just having like a benchmark to a single asset.
And I think, as you wrote in their initial proposal, which then we were questioning, right? We were saying, why would we want to pay a management fee on staking ETH and DXD appreciation? And so that's when I think they came back with a proposal of maybe a flat fee rather than the performance, right?
Yeah, that's why they're like the 200, 380, 390 there. That discussion there. And then there was that one, and also like the operational one, so they kind of combined those. Okay, we do have another somewhat juicy topic that we can get to in just a second that I'd like to talk about briefly, but I don't want to move on from this too quickly. Yeah. Cool. So I just said, actually read this recommendation. I think it kind of, I hope, kind of walks a fine line between a lot of these different things we're talking about in terms of, discussing outside treasury management, focusing first on the accounting and operations stuff for that. So have a read of this, and then if it passes, we'll look to introduce this to DXgov governance through the forum next week or after this passes.
Well, I guess it's already passed.
Well, I think no, I think you could have everyone vote against it, right, in that time period. But I'm hoping, as the discussion went, I think there's broad consensus on this. Not unanimous consensus, of course. Okay, next topic, I want to go to the mStable acquisition proposal. So maybe Ross, you just want to like run through this very quickly on the background and kind of where we're at for this. Ross G.
Yeah, let me, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So mStable is currently looking for someone to acquire them, either that or sort of wind down. The gist of it is their runway is dwindling, and they don't see any way to raise funds in the near future. So they're sort of in this position where they have started sort of shopping themselves around to different parties. And the firm that did so reached out to Chris. And so this is sort of a summary of the current situation, some of the conversations that were had with him that I was a part of listening in, and have put together this document. It goes over their treasury, which is currently about $2.15 million. It goes over at the front. You can see some of the posts sort of laying out the rationale here. I think going on their forum, if you really want to dive in, going on their forum is the place to see everything. It also looks at token stats, their fully diluted valuation. You can get all that information here. Some links, as well as sort of what the assets are. That's what we talked about. It's the treasury. They have new meta vaults, a new meta vault product. They have existing products and about 6 million TVL in their group of products. And then, I think the team members seem to be interested in continuing to work on this product. And so they are looking for some way to continue doing that and receive funding. Something to be aware of is that the reason that they're having to stop this is because they're not profitable. Basically, they're not really sustainable. In the funds are not bringing in as much money as they need to fund their contributors, which is about $2 million, $2.2 million a year. Basically no revenue. You see, it would require $300 million in TVL for them to break even at their current burn rate, which is impossible. It's never been that high. So anyway, so they have a number of products. Basically, the one of note is their new yield product, which uses the 4626 MetaVault's ERC 4626 MetaVault sort of specification. meant to be sort of very composable across DeFi. They have one out. They have a few others that have been done. Yes, I will give you the floor in a second, Matt. And so here it just has some info on the products. I also sort of have a very quick, rough part dealing with potential ways that the DAO could potentially structure this if they were interested, whether that's fully with DXD tokens, whether it's cash and tokens. In the long run, there would be a cost. And so it's something that the DAO would need to be very aware of, being happy with what it's getting, and potentially get some development help. But really, in terms of product, there's not a whole lot there. But I encourage everyone to read this if they're interested. And yeah, I will. The timeline is very quick. So they're trying to get this done, like have a preliminary proposal by the end of this week, have final proposals by next week, like end of next week. I understand that's like crazy fast for a DAO. But who knows if it doesn't happen, if that can slide a bit more, whether, if they don't get anything, they just decide to shut things down. Not 100% sure. Anyway, that's the gist. Matty, burn is high. Matty, I relinquish the floor to you.
Yeah, appreciate that. And hopefully this is appropriate. So I just have a little bit of insider knowledge here, just because I actually introduced, when mStable told me about this, like as soon as it was happening, and I introduced them to the Alistar team with Sam and Jordan there. I would say that, like, from a product development standpoint, like, I think that's the reason why a lot of the team is kind of trying to call it quits, is they've realized they just haven't found product market fit, that they're falling behind in kind of the sector that they're trying to play in. I also introduced them to a competitor who I think is actually I was talking to them at ETH Denver, and is very, very interested, and is probably, maybe I'm assuming wrong, but probably deeper in this process than you guys might be at this point. And would probably have the ability to bid higher. Because again, it would just be like a simple transfer of like their TVL into similar strategies. And so I think that there's probably at least in my mind, a better fit there, and they could probably bid more related to that. But everything I know about the team, like they're really great guys. A couple of them are like really talented. I can't speak to the whole group, and there's probably value there from an IP perspective as well. But I personally, based off what I know, would not recommend DXDAO like moving forward with acquiring the assets of mStable, because I think there's probably better suited parties who can pay more for that. And I think there's probably some little bit of expertise on the stablecoin front to accommodate future product development and capturing market share to get there. And maybe DXDAO has that, but that would definitely be a requirement in my mind.
Awesome, thank you. And Nominate says, usually this happens at a discount to Treasury, not a premium. The reason that it rids founders of a lot of headache and legal concerns. So paying a premium here would be quite odd. I was very curious to know who would potentially be the other buyers for this, because I'm not sure exactly who this would fit, because the product is there. So I was curious, but actually Daddy Matty mentioned a couple of these that would maybe make more sense. And I guess it sounded like they were willing to pay a premium. I don't think it would be worth much of a premium, but I'm also not really sure of, I guess I don't know of other examples where somebody's been acquired below book value. Maybe you have a specific example.
Yeah, I think the premium here is really around like you're getting TVL and like you're paying for that, but then you're probably getting some IP that is like contributing to that premium. I think that's their thinking behind it. Whether they actually get that or not, I think is yet to be seen.
It'll be an NFT someday in Nominate, though. It's the loss-making IP. Yeah, and just some discussion here from Connor, John, Hedgehog, some reflection on MTA fun stat. I think we said this, MTA actually launched their sale through Mesa in July 2020. So it was like a very early product. There was, I think, 10,000 AL that came from Gnosis for that. So it like goes back a long way. So there's some interesting history there. And yeah, I think just kind of echo what maybe Ross said in there, but when we're thinking about these, deals and potential acquisitions in general, like the whole point is we have to open our mind to maybe this possibly could work, even though most of the time, not more than the vast majority, 80-90% of the time, it's just not going to work out, right? So I think we ran this due diligence process about a year ago on Agave, when they had kind of a hack and there was a potential for recapitalization there. Should DXgov participate? We had some back and forth in the community on that, which I think again was very helpful, but ultimately we're like, it's not really a good fit. And I think we're kind of maybe reaching the same consensus here, but I think this conversation of potential acquisitions and deals is a important one for us to get familiar with. So when there is something that like pops up that does really fit a specific need for DXgov, there is an opportunity to move quickly because we kind of understand the process here. And even just like thinking about the due diligence process, that's why I think it was really great to have all of this information in the thread itself so that people could make that decision quickly. Like, okay, this doesn't actually make as much sense.
Yeah, maybe one other comment I'll say, and then I'll shut up. Just because like my background is in mergers and acquisition and financial due diligence, that I think like this space is very unique in thinking about that because everything is forkable. Like, I mean, I would assume if you guys really found like their technology to be, intriguing, that it's always forkable and then you can iterate on that. And where the value really lies is like committed users and committed TVL. And I think that like this type of TVL, if it were to go onto new ownership and under new strategies, there's probably a fair chance that a lot of the users that are contributing to that TVL could just leave, right? So that's why like a competitor who's doing similar strategies and has a similar risk profile and kind of is in that game is more likely to maintain control of that TVL longer term versus like it being a completely new, unrelated acquirer. So that's just how I would think about something like this as well. That's a little bit nuanced from like a traditional mergers and acquisition engagement.
And maybe just one more thing on that is, I think I said this in my post, I think there may be some opportunity we can look at these things to acquire a development team to DXgov, right? But that's a whole other thing of how that exactly works because you have to structure that, be committed for a certain amount of time. We can't really tie people. We can't acquire something and say, okay, the founders need to work at DXgov for 2.5 years or something. I guess we could vest something in that way. But I also think there's some opportunity more on these groups of developers and team members that already have a good working relationship with. Is there an opportunity to try to like onboard them? If there's something specific they can work on at DXgov, we can kind of have value there. In addition to like the pure assets of the protocol or the DAO. Cool. Other thoughts on this here or in the forum? I'll probably leave it up for another day, and then maybe tomorrow morning, just reach out to the Astor guys and update them that we ran, we kicked the tires and had some conversations, but ultimately was not really much of a fit. So if you have anything, please say it in the forum before tomorrow morning. Okay. That's it for this one. We went over just a couple minutes, just 2 fun calls to attention. There's some great Swapper token next steps discussion going, not just between Venki and Ross G, but also it's kind of gotten some great people from the community, Refry, Spicy Soup, maybe someone else I can't remember was in there. That's a great one to check out. And then there's also been someone, Mattis, who applied for mission warden, having some updates on that, trying to get more written assessments, and accountability into DXgov. So feel free to check that out. And if you know anyone that would be a good candidate, send them my way, or they can nominate themselves directly on that forum post. That's it for today's call. Sorry for running over a couple minutes late, but thanks everyone for joining and have a happy Wednesday.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Thanks.